Hey, we're back. Sketch Zone Nation. You know how I always talk about being giddy when we book someone that you've been following and you've been admiring for a long time. Today, friends, is that day. That's because we have did I introduce myself? Hi, I'm Carlos.
This is what you call
I'm excited. I forgot to name myself.
This is what you call real giddy. All right, let's try. Keep going, Carlos.
Yo, we got Dawud Anyabwile and Guy Sims.
Hey, what's happening?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you're going to have a whole studio audience.
Oh,
Yo, they keep coming back.
Paid for, friends.
That's great. One guy in the audience always gets excited at the end there.
Right.
That's it. He knows. He's been. Yeah. So before I get way too excited and forget to introduce these guys, we got Charlie B. Williams III.
What's up, guys? I'm back. It's another week. Feel good? Let's go.
And we got Jack Kasperzak.
Yes, I'm here. This is exciting.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get a little bit of updates done. Just announced Pixelogic has released the schedule for ZBrush Live. That's available.
What's the date?
I had it up, and it is going to happen.
I promise it will happen.
It looks like I don't know. How you gonna? It says schedule, and it says May to June 2017. So we know it's gonna happen.
Is it the summit, or is it like they're like live streaming Twitch thing or whatever? They've been really big on that lately too.
Yeah, I think it might be a Twitch stream.
Yeah, so ZBrush and Pixelogic, makers of ZBrush, basically what they did was they finally went on to Twitch. You know, Twitch is a really big phenomenon right now on the internet, and they have a dedicated channel. And just like if you don't know what Twitch is a streaming service usually made popular by people playing games online and people watching them, thus turning into personalities in the form of streamers. Streaming games. You can do games, you can do competitive, you have lifestyle streamers, you have creatives. So the whole creative part of Twitch just started about this year, last year or two or so. It's getting really big. So now ZBrush is on there. And you know, ZBrush does a good job of pushing all type of content on their thing. So now they have streamers, just like your favorite video game streamers would have, channels would have streamers. So now ZBrush has their own set of streamers, that artists that are going to go on there and live stream and make stuff, and they have like scheduled content all the time. Also, their ZBrush Summit will be pushed to that when they have it, and we'll figure out when that is. But I think Carlos saw the schedule for the streams, because they do a lot of stuff now. I mean, they're sponsoring artists and stuff. So
yeah, I was under. They tricked me because I was in the assumption that it was going to be the.
No, it's still a big thing though, because like, you know, Twitch is becoming more than just video games, man. Like the creative section, if you guys haven't been in that section, you know, there's some of my favorite 3D artists are on there and stuff like that, just streaming and stuff like that.
Some of my favorite 2D artists are on there.
Yeah.
Hashtag see you there.
Yeah. So that's what that was. Yeah.
Cool. Guy, Dawud, do you guys get into 3D at all?
Me, no, I'm a pen and paper kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I messed around with Maya a little bit, but I mean, as far as being proficient with it, that's something that I've always wanted to explore, especially with the ZBrush. You know, I've messed around with it, but
yeah,
I'm usually my time is always locked down with just my 2D drawing. That you know, it takes so much time to focus to do 3D that sometimes I say, you know, I'll just leave that to the masters now. I'll work on conceptualization and let them handle it.
I have seen some of your little collabos here and there. We have a common friend in Danny Williams
Yeah.
has done a really good piece, one of your Brotherman piece in ZBrush, and it looked amazing. You know,
Oh
I
yeah,
really
yeah.
sent that out to you and stuff like it was beautiful. You know, so that's he's been on the show too.
Danny's all right. Danny's all right.
On the show,
You
Danny.
know.
Shout out to Danny Williams.
He got some skills.
Yeah. Shout out to him.
You know, he didn't blow up until he came on the show. You
Now,
know.
look at you. Here we go. Now, hear about it now. You know. I wouldn't be surprised he's not watching. I told him to tune in because you're gonna be on the show. So yeah.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah, Danny's been killing it for a minute. Yeah, so that's ZBrush. One of the things that, speaking of you know, streaming live and doing all that good stuff, I started watching some of the process videos that Dawud, you came out with and you posted on YouTube. And no lie, I was working on a commission as I was watching you draw, and I just about sent it, but then I clicked play on your video. And then I went back to work.
Hey, I'm glad it helped. I'm glad it helped somebody.
I was like, I cannot let this go like this. Knowing that you are out there and that you were gonna come on here, I didn't want to look foolish. I was like,
You wouldn't look.
rein that one back in.
Hey, I'm glad you appreciate it. Cause you know, you post stuff up. Sometimes you don't know who's looking at it, or you know how it's inspiring somebody or whatever. You know, so glad to hear that.
Yeah. So let's talk, because before the show, Guy and I were talking about having a brother. You guys are brothers, and growing up with brothers and stuff. And on the show, I've described before where I got into art because my older brother started drawing, and I wanted to draw better than him. And then he stopped. He stopped, and I just kept going. So now I'm officially better than him, at least last time I checked. But how is it growing up? Because it seems like, so let me clarify this. You guys are obviously behind the comic book, the comic book Brotherman. Dawud is the illustrator, co-creator and illustrator, and Guy is the co-creator and the writer. So I'm assuming that you guys grew up kind of in a creative household.
Yeah, very. Can I jump? I'll go first.
Okay.
Just because I'm older, so I can.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, see, Dawud, I feel your pain.
It's happening. It's happening.
Here we go.
No, yeah, a very creative household, and very well balanced between the academic and the spiritual, as well as the creative. And I think that helped translate into the kind of, I guess, artists that we are today, and that we continue to evolve into. Our mother played the piano, required us to sing around the piano. She was a teacher, so she always brought home materials from school, from whatever school she was working, that we could utilize to do our own specific talents. Our father, he messed around with the guitar, but he was a singer in his own right. For a man just to be sitting around house singing, always music in the house, but always, I think, primary, encouraging all of us. There were 4 boys, encouraging all of us to follow whatever talents we wanted to follow. I tell my kids, I said, whenever, if you wanted to really get out of chores, my dad would say, hey, what are you doing? If you're saying you're working on your talent or doing something, he kind of left you alone. Or he said, just do this and the rest of the day is yours. If you said, oh, I'm bored, I have nothing to do, he had plenty to do. And so he always encouraged you to work on your stuff. And he was always critical, not critical in the negative sense, but inquiring, what does your work mean? And I mean, he shut me down one time when he said, you're writing stuff and it's just not making sense. And I thought about it because we had a long discussion about it. But it really helped turn the tide on my direction of my art, and I think I must have been in like 7th or 8th grade or something like that. So, and I know Dawud has his moments with Dad. We're 4 years apart by birth.
Yeah, for me, my oldest brother Michael, he passed away in 2010, but he was the first one that inspired me to want to draw. Like when I don't remember what age Michael was when he was doing the animated movies, when he did the stop motion. I just remember, I think I was in like 1st grade.
He was in
something like that,
like 8th or something.
Yeah,
7th or 8th.
Yeah, and I just remember like looking at, because he was doing stop motion similar to like South Park, and this is like 1970. You know, he was cutting all the shapes out, but they were like sci-fi movies. And in the whole basement, he laid out this long black rollout felt thing. Wow. And then he cut out every little star to make space, and then he created the spaceship out of a cutout, and the planets and everything. And then when he finished, you know, that actually, I wish I still had it, because for a long time it really held up in quality, you know, in terms of a quality production. So I used to always want to draw like him, but then he was more left-brained and went towards mathematics. He became a mechanical engineer. And so he kind of left the arts and the film and all that stuff for me and my other brother, Jason, who was doing animation, special effects. We used to do like the clay animation, like the Sinbad movies and all that stuff, making little miniatures in our bedroom and model rockets and you know, all that type of stuff. So that creativity was there. And then you couple that with the kids in the neighborhood where they all like to do something creative. So that was always around in the early developmental years.
And let me also say, back in the 70s, I remember him doing the and I remember you remember this, Dawud, the bleaching on the film. I don't know if that's a technical term for it. To somebody would disappear and you just do the effect of the bleaching, and then they're gone. And so, you know, all that stuff, you know, that was happening in our house, and it was just a cool thing. We, you know, I never thought about it. It was strange. I figured other kids were doing that in their house too.
So basically what you're telling us is your family is to animation that the Jacksons were to music.
Hey, I wish I could say that, because I actually tell people that coming up, I didn't know professionals. You know, like we did this, but the way we did this, you know, we didn't have access to like I never knew any professional artists. There was never a professional artist who can come down and show me, hey, here's the right way to do this. You know, like I had art teachers, but it's not the same as somebody who's an industry person who said, hey, I worked in this or I worked on that production. So as far as I was concerned, back in those days, cartoons were made on another planet. Because we had no idea where Saturday morning cartoons were made. You just watched them and you wanted to do it. And we would go to the library to try to figure out how to do it. But, you know, back then, library books weren't state of the art. You know, you get an animation book, you know, you always had that one animation book, you know, shows you how to draw the chipmunk.
How to draw yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like
the pages were loose, people putting little mustaches on.
It's always checked out.
Yeah, and I'm like, come on, man.
Bring it back.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll never catch up at this rate. You know what I mean? But that's how it was, you know. And I think Fantastic Films magazine, Fangoria, you know, they had little special effects things in the back. So it wasn't the same. That's why, you know, I tell my sons and younger people now, like, you know, you guys are growing up in a great time because you have access to professionals, and state of the art equipment, and the professionals, they'll have their screen recordings up there so you can see their process. And that's why younger people you can see their technique is like on professional level by the time they're teenagers. artists.
Right.
Because they have access, they're seeing things, so they're processing things that it took us to get into our 20s and 30s to finally understand. Oh, so okay, so that's how you do it, you know. So so I would say, you know, we had advantages back then in that the arts was cultivated, but I believe there was still a lot of disadvantages in terms of just not knowing how things were being done, and that kind of forces you to just create your own route. So there's always a pro and a con to that. You know what I mean? But we can get into that. So.
Where'd you guys grow up?
Philadelphia.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't hear a lot of, even schools. There's not like Philadelphia's school of really cool animation.
That sounds like a good title, but I would have went there.
Right?
What is it? College of Cool Animation.
Yeah, my friend.
I'd be
Bachelor's
in line.
amazing. Yeah.
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 That's funny. So then let's talk about where you got your inspiration for writing. I mean, I know you touched on it where your dad was kind of pushing you in that direction, but where does a writer go to like pick up tips and tricks and stuff?
You know, I think it all comes from, and I'll say it's different. I know definitely it has to be different from, well, I'll say this. I didn't know any published people that I could really say, hey, I know this person. You know, my father worked at a college and we were introduced to people, but it wasn't the same thing as, you know, this is somebody and they show you, hey, this is how books are put together. Because it's like, where are cartoons made? How is a book made? I couldn't tell you. You know, they magically end up in the library.
Right.
When they close the door, there's a little man in there, you know. But I think I like to tell stories, and a teacher will then, you know, sometimes a teacher will recognize that which a teacher did, and they kind of move you to the next phase. Hey, if you're gonna like to tell stories, maybe you need to learn how to write them down. And then you take a couple more classes, and then you get to read. And really, I just mimicked a lot of books that I read. For the comic books, you know, I remember when we first started, you know, I said, well, I think you have to do this, because I didn't know anybody who wrote a comic book. Yeah. I said, well, I looked at them. You know, I've seen enough comic books in my day. I say, well, they generally start out with one big square. And so that's the first one. Then you turn the page. Nice. It might be four to six of them. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, but I used my theater background of understanding how plays are written. I've never met a playwright, but I've read enough Shakespeare from 8th grade on. I said, okay, well, you know, person's name, colon. What are they doing? What did they say?
Right. Yeah.
Act 3, scene 2. I mean, that much I know. And so I said, I just, you know, you just take that and you dump it down into what you're trying to do. So, you know, I do poetry, short stories, you know, I do academic writing, you know, so I do a whole lot of writing, you know, writing speeches for people and things like that. So it's just, you just take that ball of wax and you bring it over here in a creative atmosphere. But I didn't start meeting writers until later on in life. And I mean, recent, within the last like 10, 15 years, really meeting people who, this is what I do. A lot of it has always been a pretty solitude type activity, because I really didn't know anybody.
Meanwhile, these guys are dealing up nothing but fire, and he's like, I've never met a writer.
Or, you know, and I know Dawud knew people who were artists, and, you know, he knew a couple of guys that did comic books until I like to do this too, who wrote a comic book. That once again, another alien activity for somebody else.
And I think that's really cool. You seem to find it over and over again where kids with limited access to, you know, those professionals have a tendency to figure it out. And
they create their own way till they, you know, either they become super successful or they hit a wall where now I do have to find some professional mentoring or something like that.
Right. And then we should also point out that part of your team is Brian Magee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he couldn't join us tonight.
He's a master colorist, though.
It's got the good colors.
Do you guys know how he got started in the creative industry?
He's talked about his history several times. I would rather have him explain his background and his journey, but I know with his mother, like his mother was I don't want to say exactly what her role was, but you know, Brian grew up in Lower Manhattan. So he was a part of the arts, or I would say exposed to the arts as a young person. Through his mom. I think his mom knew a lot of people who were professionals in the field of plays and things like that. But like I said, don't take my word on it. But because I met Brian we were both working at Turner Broadcasting. He was at Cartoon Network and I was at Turner Studios. So by the time I met him, he was already on fire with what he was doing, and we kind of like just bumped into each other, and that's a whole nother story right there. But he sent his apologies he couldn't be on tonight.
Oh no, that's okay, because that just gives us an excuse to have you all back on. Donation. There's going to be a Brotherman Part 2.
All right, we'll do it.
So again, it's your story with creating Brotherman is just it's one of hard work. Of we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, you bump into Brian. Oh, hey, what's going on? And through that conversation, now all of a sudden you got this team that's just dealing fire. So yeah, that story is very inspiring, heroic. I mean,
yeah,
on throwing some really good. Really good.
And so, like, when was it that you guys decided to team up together? I mean, obviously you were doing creative stuff as kids, and you saw each other like on your own paths. But when is it that you actually were like, we should do this together because we both clearly know what's up? And when did?
Well, okay. Well, the thing is with Brian, that was kind of like that was the latest team up. You know, that was basically more like the second coming of Brotherman.
Right.
When we talk about the birth of Brotherman, that goes back to 1989.
Yeah.
And that's when we have another brother, Jason, who served as a production manager, and Jason had went to UCLA, Temple University, and he majored in communications. And for me, from 1980, I graduated high school in 83. And the reason why I say the early 80s is significant to the birth of Brotherman is because for me, that was my experience in dealing with the general public. So what I started doing was airbrushing t-shirts at the mall in Philadelphia, the Gallery Mall, which was like the largest mall on the East Coast at the time. And everybody went there. I mean, you know, even Fresh Prince was rapping about going to the Gallery Mall, and parents don't understand because that was like the place everybody went to. Yeah. And so I had like a prime spot there. I talked the manager, me and a friend of mine, we went down there and talked the manager into having a spot to airbrush. And my friend, he was like basically like my manager, and I was doing shirts. I did like hundreds of shirts throughout the 80s. You know, the names and the jeans and the jean jackets and all that crazy stuff. And and that was during the era when, especially like black kids in the inner city, they weren't seeing themselves on shirts, because the average shops, they had like Warner Brother characters, or kittens and things like that. And I was drawing like, hey, I'll put you on a shirt. I'll make it look like you. And that's where I really started developing my style, was like from 85, 86 into 87. So then by the time 80, let's see, and then I had my own custom airbrush shops after that shop closed down in like 86. Then I opened up a shop in Chester, Pennsylvania, which is a little town outside of Philly, and then a shop in North Philadelphia. And these are like little hole in the wall joints, and they were like my first shop. And I was continuing dealing with the general public. So I was doing like, and I knew a lot of graffiti writers from all over the city, and that was kind of more like my inspiration. I was a fine arts major in high school, but now I'm dealing with artists from all over the city, and we had kind of like this friendly competition going on. Hey, I could do this, I could do this. Everybody having sketchbook battles and all that stuff. And that's what was really live in the 80s. The hip hop was really jumping off and everything. So when the Black Expo New York started in 89, at that time I had a custom airbrush shop in East Orange, New Jersey, which is right across the river. And my brother Jason had came back from UCLA, and we teamed up and said, hey, okay, let's have some airbrush shirts at the Black Expo 1990, because we went there in 89 to see what it was like, and it was just like jam-packed with people. And that was kind of like a new phenomenon at the time. And we said, well, we need to be there in 1990. And they said, well, we need to have something that would be a hook. And we thought to do a comic book, because we used to make these comic flyers to promote our shop in Jersey. And we'd give away the flyer, and people will read the flyer and say to be continued, but you got to come to the store. And then people will come in the store, to get shirts done. So that's really how that started. And I knew one guy who did comics named Reggie Byers. And he had a comic book company called Victory Comics. And there's these brothers that lived in Norristown outside of Philly. And Reggie, he showed me, he said, hey, this is the type of paper we use. You can get your books printed at a place, because back then it was hard to find out who prints comic books. It's not like now you got on demand, so many people print comics. Back then you had to find a special printer with a web press to print comics, and there weren't a lot of them. There was one in Wheeling, West Virginia, one in San Antonio, and I think someplace else. And he put us on to that, and then he was telling us about Diamond Distributors and Capital Distributors. And they said, after you get your book done, you want to get them distributed through here. And pretty much after he gave us that information, the rest was on us. So then we took that information, called on Guy, and said, Guy, you want to do a comic book so we can have it at this Black Expo? And they pull in so many people, it's crazy. And so the idea was, back then you had to print 10,000 books. It wasn't like on demand now where you can just get one book. Back then a print run was 10,000 books, which is like 30 huge boxes. And at the time we didn't know what 10,000 books looked like until the big yellow freight truck pulled up in a little narrow street in East Orange, New Jersey, and everybody's looking like, yo, what is that? And so when we ordered the books, our thing was, okay, if we get 10,000 books, the Black Expo pulls like 100,000 people. All we need is 10,000 people to spend $2, and we make $20,000. So that was the philosophy. It wasn't like, hey, let's make a comic
easy math
book.
right there, kid.
Yeah, it wasn't like, hey, I'm trying to be the best comic artist, because I wasn't even competing with, I didn't even know what people were doing in the comic field. I didn't care. I was thinking about that specific audience that I already sell airbrush shirts to.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to do the labor of custom airbrush shirt here, $10 here, $15 here, $30 there. I just do one story, same style. The same audience who buys my shirts since 1983, 84, they're going to be there. And we'll have a $2 book. Bam. Everything's going to be great. That was how this all really started. And we called on Guy because that was the logical choice, because Guy was a writer. He was the writer that we knew. Right. So Guy came up, and we basically got together, and Brotherman was born.
Nice.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How did that idea come about? Did you already have the idea happening in your head, or did you guys sit around a table and work it out as a team?
Well, we had you know, I had a sketchbook in my, you know, I had tons of sketchbooks, and when we were trying to think of an idea, I had a character, you know, it said Brotherman, just like I have any other characters in my book. They may be undeveloped, things that I didn't even think I would probably do anything with, because I had a lot of stories that I had conceptualized but just never developed. So we were thinking, hey, let's do this superhero type thing. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing, and you could see the evolution in Brotherman, how it went from this tongue-in-cheek style to evolving into its own universe. Mm-hmm. Because at first, you know, we were like Guy said, how they do it in the comic books? Oh, they do this, they do that. You got a hero. There's a you know, he's always got this grimy boss. You know, that's where Duke Denham came from. You know, and Melody was his co-worker. But we said let's make them like the people that we know. And so it's almost like you're casting the people that you know to play these tropes. Mm-hmm. And that's how it began. And Antonio Valor was kind of like a representation of how we felt. You know, growing up, we just felt like a lot of men, and particularly black men in the community, they always get this bad rap. Like, we always know about, you know, Papa was a Rolling Stone, and mm-hmm. you know, and I always loved my mama. But they said, well, what about the man who is taking care of his family, the man who does care about his community? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And for us, it was like we grew up with a lot of men who were defenders of the community. And they took care of their families. They were martial arts teachers. They were scientists. People like Sonia Sanchez used to come, you know, my father knew people like her and Dr. Malefe Asante, a lot of these black historians and writers. So for us, that was common, but we don't see them in mythology. We don't see them edified in a way where they're heroic. So Brotherman was like, you know, start off, well, he kind of represents that person that's fighting against injustice, but he's kind of on the up and up to the point where people don't even believe he's real. Because in society, it's kind of like that's how the black man is perceived anyway. Right. That, oh, if he has principles and all this stuff, that's not real. And It's like, for us, it's very real. Yeah. So that's really that. It's like there's so many levels to the construction of the book where, yeah, it's a comic book. Yeah, we're having fun. Yeah, it represents this, though, from our history. And then Guy can tap in like what he decided he wanted to throw in it to build. And then I played off of Guy's writing, because when Guy wrote just the intro to the book, then I started seeing something more. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I got into the books also. That's how it was introduced to me. I mean, I'm 36 now, so I was born in 1980. So by the time I was 10 or 12 or so, I kind of knew what Brotherman was from getting into comic books. Like, I had an uncle that got me all my comic books and started my collection. But maybe a year later, and I don't know, we could talk about this later, because then you start talking about how important the Black Expo was. I'm from Indiana, so Indiana Black Expo was really big. Yeah, so I got my first couple books from the Indiana Black Expo because either a person at my church or somebody knew I was reading all these comic books, and they was like, how about you read this one instead, you know? And that's how I got into it. So then I was like, oh, this is cool. And I started buying them. I started getting them bought, or my parents and, you know, deacons or whoever started finding them for me once those runs were happened. So yeah, that's exactly how it was explained to me. And that's how I started giving them out to other people at our church and stuff like that too, because they knew we were reading all these other Marvel, Spider-Man, all the regular stuff. And it was like, yo, you know, this guy's this guy like your dad, you know, so you should read this one, you know. And that's kind of how it was introduced to me too, you know. He didn't have a weapon, was a good role model. It's great. And the style was awesome. So keep going.
Yeah, and like I said, Guy could add to, like, I guess the spin that he put on it when we first started.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like and I think it is true. When I first started, you know, here we're up in New Jersey. I was living in Delaware, and you know, hey, we're going to do this. And I said, okay, well, let me go back to my place in Delaware, and I'll come up with a story and then a script. You know, I knew we had to do that. And so I, just like Dawud said, okay, well, you got to have the hero. What does he do? And then, you know, he has his alter ego. But I said, clearly, you know, when I think of Superman and Lois Lane, well, when I, you know, and I wasn't using that as a model, but I understood it. I said, well, I don't want his coworker to be the perpetual damsel in distress. I thought about the girls that I knew from high school, you know, and the girls that I knew from a college, and you know, the ones that I really respected, and they had their own attitude, and they didn't take any mess. And not to say that she couldn't get into a spot or a tight spot, but she's not going to fall apart, you know, waiting for someone to get her. I think, you know, if you read, if you're familiar with the Brothermans, there's a point when Melody ends up in jail. I think it's episode 6 or episode 7, and got the rough girls in jail getting ready to attack her, you know, and she holds her own until something else, until she gets out of jail. She's bailed out. But that's what I wanted from her, and I wanted her to be different from Antonio Valor. And so I thought about, okay, well, we live in a city, you know, the girls who lived outside the city, they were different. And so I try to put all those together. And then, of course, the character Duke Denham, the boss, and I did go with that, you know, every cop show that you've seen, you got the hotshot cops and the boss that is always frustrated. You guys are not going back. But then they solve the case. You guys are all right. Yeah, you shot me. You know, like that. And so I thought about him, but he also was like Dawud had that character in his sketchbook. Duke Denham was a character that I not fully developed in my own little box of writings that, you know, it's 10 paragraphs and then it's just put in the box for later. And I said there's going to be something with this guy, but later on, and we do get to develop him a whole lot further, and we brought a whole nother level of life to Big City. And the first villain in the Brotherman Comics was the Seductress. And once again, I went with the traditional, quasi-traditional, okay, the woman in the costume, but then, you know, I thought I gave her a strong enough backstory of who she was and why she's doing it. And but you know, she was light, but I think the change came was with issue number 3, because now we have the first issue, the second issue. We're getting feedback from the public, and it wasn't I'll say it wasn't the traditional feedback that I think your mainstream comics get. You know, you get the book and like, oh man, that's cool, then you walk away. People were really associating themselves with the book. They saw themselves in the book. They said, hey, this book has a message in it. And I'm not sitting there saying what message I want to write in the book, but I think who we are is translated into the book, and then it's translated out to the public. So you start feeling good about it. And then if you can see the transition, at least I see it, from issue number 2 and then issue number 3, I'll say writing wise, you know, I started taking more chances, saying, okay, if they like that, I'm gonna put this in here. I'm gonna play with the language. I'm gonna add a whole lot more prose in the book.
Right.
I'm gonna make the story a little more complex. And if you look at the artwork from 1 and 2 to number 3, I once again, I don't know the technical term that you guys love. The way Dawud drew images bleeding from one panel to the next, and he can probably explain it better. But it was freer, and I think from that point on, you know, I knew, oh, we can really do this our way, and we have an audience that's digging it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, because when you guys were talking about getting feedback from people, and you finally released your books, and then you're starting to build a fan base, but I'm sure you had a couple haters out there. It reminded me.
If they were, they didn't talk to me. They didn't talk to me. They didn't talk to me. I guess the other. Oh no! Wait a second. There was a lady that talked to me. It was at that first expo, that first expo in New York, and this lady came up, and God bless her wherever she is. But and she was looking through the book, and she said, "What is this?" I'm like, I'm thinking, "What is this?" As in, "Hey, what is it?" She's looking, and she says, "I have never seen a black man in a suit."
That's where I wanted to go with this.
And I said, "You've never seen," I had to repeat it, "You've never seen a black man in a suit?" And she said, "No." I said, "You've never been to a wedding or a funeral?" And then she walked away. So I'll say that's my one.
Oh man,
man,
that's great.
that's funny.
Yes.
We had a guy. One of our first shows was with an artist, Anthony Piper, the creator of Trill League. Have you guys seen that?
Oh yeah,
I've seen clips of it. I haven't seen it. I don't know what it is, but I've seen clips of it.
Yeah. So basically, he started out with how do you say it?
Hmm?
It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when people say this, but here we go. Urbanizing.
Okay.
Superheroes.
Okay.
And now he's at the point where there's a lot of people. He's got all kinds of momentum going, and he's got all kinds of eyeballs, and people are starting to maybe look at funding him and stuff like that. But then there's part of the black community that came back and said, "Yo, why are you making fun of us? You're selling out," type of thing.
mm-hmm.
I guess, well, I don't even know if you guys agree with what he's doing. So I guess if you guys, what are some words of advice, I guess, that you can give someone like Anthony, who's just starting to build up a head of steam?
Well, to me, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I always tell people, like, when you create something, it's your creation, and it's basically like, if you're going to create something, you have to be able to back up what it is that you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's the whole thing about creative freedom. You can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? And it's just, hey, just back up in whatever it is that you're doing. It really doesn't matter what I think about it or what other people think. It's does he believe in it? And if he believes in it, then you got to put in the work and make it happen. Because no matter what it is that you're going to do, you're never going to have 100% of everybody behind you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, like, I really can't say what it is he's going to do, because I feel like that's his journey. Mm-hmm. To me, I just say, hey, just own it. Whatever you do, you got to own it in all ways, meaning own the responsibility of it. And also you want to own the financial aspect of it. Mm-hmm. When we put our thing together from the jump, we were always about family. To me, even outside of Brotherman, like, I tend to lean towards wanting to do projects that reflect things that are family centered. Mm-hmm. And I like action. I like things that are dynamic. I don't like things that are degrading or derogatory. In terms of my effort, not to say, hey, I wouldn't watch something like, somebody else made it. I'm just watching and being entertained. But what am I going to put my time and my effort into creating? And I think about what I'm going to create, because it's just like Guy said from the beginning, that goes back to our childhood. Like, when I created things, my father would say, hey, what is this? Mm-hmm. Talk about it. Explain it. What is this representing? What is this doing what is this doing for your community? Is it uplifting it or is it bringing it down? So we came up in that environment where everybody may not have had that type of background, and then some people they may have, and they still make a decision to say, well, you know, I'm doing what I want to do, and that goes back to what I'm saying. Well, you just got to back up what you do, and you know, all power to you. With me, my thing is I just prefer to do it. I don't tell people they got to do what I do. I just tell people, hey, this is my journey, is to be able to create something that can sit on a coffee table and everybody can pick it up, and hopefully, you know, it's something that they can all read and enjoy together. That's just the vibe that I like. I like that type of atmosphere, and that's what Brotherman actually created. I mean, we've had families, just like we're talking about the feedback. The most of the feedback, we didn't have a lot of what you call the haterism now. Now, I guess now you got social media, you know, that's probably more prominent because people could say stuff and hide.
Right.
But when we came up, you know, it was, I mean, a lot of the support that we had was phenomenal. It was actually greater than what I thought. I thought we were coming out like, you know, because me, I'm the biggest critic of my own artwork. I knew what all my weaknesses were. Once I draw something, I automatically see oh man, I should have drew this like this. So I'm thinking everybody's looking at all my flaws, you know, but other people that like, man, this is great, you know. And Brotherman was nominated. Well, actually, I was nominated in '92 for a Will Eisner Award as best artist, up there with top billers like Will Eisner himself, and the creator of Judge Dredd and all them. You know, I didn't win. Oh, Sergio Aragonés.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm thinking to myself, like, what am I doing on this list? You know what I mean? Because that's only 2 years in. I was feeling like I'm still trying to get to know who I am and where I'm going. But just to come back to what you're saying is that I think Guy and I have a certain understanding that's rooted in who we are and how we were raised. And I don't expect other people to do what we do. I just kind of, when other people tell me about what they're doing, I don't try to be the image police or whatever. I just tell them, hey, I try to look for the positive, which, hey, do you own it? Then try to own it. Because at certain points, some people, they may do something at this point now and come into a certain understanding a couple years later and then evolve into something else. And sometimes you have to give people time to grow and allow themselves to recognize where they are, because they're going to get the criticisms from people, and they probably do go home and ponder on, man, you know, somebody posted on my page and said this, is that really what I'm doing? And then one day they may turn around and then use their talent in a totally different direction, but they have to come into that knowing themselves. You can't make somebody come into a knowing. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's so true, because based off of like just how social media is nowadays, as well as just people being able to post stuff and hide, as long as they have a message. I think sometimes, if even like with Anthony Piper stuff or even with your stuff, the main thing you were saying earlier is that you have to have some type of message in what you're doing, you know. And we think back to you know, other comics that started out as comics and moved into other things like the Boondocks and stuff like that. Those all had messages, and sometimes the message comes in very different ways. But I am still surprised even today, if you look back at some of the old Boondock stuff and some of the old newspaper comics that he even did, how like some of the same issues that come up like in 2017, they spoke on it like 3-4 years ago, you know. So like I think comics and this type of genre of comics and art with the message, you know, sometimes people don't catch it right away, you know. They might not catch it till like this time next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you know. That's the best. It's the great thing about it. If you have a message in it, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter how it's being delivered, you know, somebody's gonna get it. Sometimes it just doesn't catch them right away, you know. So
yeah. And this guy hasn't got anything.
I mean, you said it. I always, you know, a lot of people, you know, ask me, hey, can you look at my writing and tell me what you think? and I know what that feels like, because there were times when I wanted to, hey, ask people to read my stuff, and then you want some feedback.
Mhm.
But I've gotten to the point now, I really try to say, hey, well, look at your structure. I always say, what story are you trying to tell? Because sometimes I think, I'm with a college, I'm a supporter of their literary magazine, and I can tell what kind of books the college students are reading by what those who are writing, what they're putting out. And I said these guys are reading a lot of urban lit. I said I could just tell, and but I say, you know what? I always say, hey, try reading this, try reading that, and you'll pick up another way to look at how you tell a story. And I think that's all I always try to get people to do. Really look at what story you're trying to tell, and there's some other ways to tell it. There's no one particular way. But I'm like Dawud. Hey, if you put it out there, you be the person in the front row saying that's it, and the market will say whether the market likes it or not. Doesn't mean it's good or not, because there's lots of stuff in the market that you say, how did that get out here? And the reason why there was one person with a boatload of money that said, I want to see it. Mm-hmm. And there you go. Right. And then other times something is fantastic and it just doesn't see the light of day.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I wanted to ask real quick was we talked about how you had a really great response, and I kind of mentioned how I got into Brotherman Comics, but can you speak on how fast Brotherman Comics took off once you guys did start at that first Black Expo? Because you're saying 2 years in you got that award. That's around the time when I heard about it way over in Indiana. And then you have the whole Arsenio Hall stuff that happened and stuff like that. Can you just talk about that momentum and how that went, I guess, national so quickly?
Yeah. Well, when we first came out with the book, and like I said, we did a 10,000 print run on Brotherman #1 in 1990. And once we came out at the Black Expo, and we sold a ton of books at the first Black Expo. We didn't sell all the 10,000 like we thought we were going to do, come home with 20,000 in the pocket in empty boxes. But we sold a ton of books. And also keep in mind, during that time, there was no Black comic movement in terms of people talking about Black comics. So people were coming to our table, seeing the stacks of Brotherman comics, and they thought they were prints, art prints, because people were used to seeing prints, in Black art. And then I remember like seeing some parents like opening up, say, "Oh, this is a comic book. Let me get 3. I need 3. I have 3 babies. Let me get 3 books." You see what I'm saying? So it wasn't like a comic convention where it's like, I just want one book. No. I want the one that edge can't be creased, and right. They're digging through the best one. Here you'll have if a mother has 5 kids. She's buying 5 books, and they fold them under their arm and walk away. You see what I'm saying?
Grandma buying them for the kids,
right? But not, and so you had the grandmothers, you had grandfathers who understood the value. Like, wow, man, I've always wanted to see something like this. Mm-hmm. You had the men who were saying, wow, something that's representing us. I'm definitely got to get this for my son, and the son may be a baby because he's got to have this. So you have this response from people that's more of an emotional response, and this is multiplying. It's going from New York. The same thing is happening in Philly. The same thing happened when we went to Chicago. Same thing happened in Dallas, and we say, wow, this is huge. You see what I'm saying? And then the media jumped on it, because in the Dallas Morning News was the first major newspaper, and then Dallas Morning News rolled into CNN headline news. Then we're on. Then that rolled into all these other media coverage. That the Philadelphia Daily News, Tribune, Chicago Tribune, the San Francisco Chronicle, and then Arsenio Hall show. They saw it in the San Francisco Chronicle, and they called us up and said, "Hey, Arsenio wants to talk about it on Friday night show." And I think it was like the beginning of the week, and they say, "Can you overnight us the book?" And that was like a dream come true. And, you know, we were like watching Arsenio that night. Is he really going to talk about this? And I remember my knees were shaking. Like, is he going to do it? And then he talked about it for like a minute and a half in his monologue at the end of his monologue.
So hey, they made you pay for overnight shipping?
I don't remember who paid, but I really don't care. I was like, two packages.
You want to pay for them too? What are you talking about? You would probably ask to hand deliver it. Stop it.
That's why I got on a plane and said, yeah, but yeah, and then that opened the doors, and then the other big one was America's Most Wanted, John Walsh. They called us up. Yeah, we were on a 5-minute segment on America's Most Wanted. BET Screen Scene. We were on BET News. We were on USA Today. We were written up in a magazine in Tokyo. And keep in mind, this is still between 1990 to 92. We had movie deals on the table. From the first year, we had a movie deal with Saban Entertainment that did Power Rangers. Then we had a deal with Columbia Television, which came through Motown, and Joel Schumacher, who did Batman, he had an interest in it. I mean, we talked to so many people, you know, over the years, and it just kept it got to the point where it was on its own momentum, where even now, like I might not even say, if I'm not even really pushing Brotherman hard, I'm still getting phone calls from people who want to, hey, can we do this? Are you guys interested in doing this? And all it is a matter of, you look at it and say, I don't know if we really want to go in that direction, or this sounds good. You know, right now we are working on some pretty cool things. But in that early period, a lot of stuff snowballed quickly, and also because of the time. It was just perfect timing. There was no Black comic movement. The Black heroes with Marvel and DC, they weren't active. They reactivated those after this Black comic movement started gaining all this momentum. But Black Panther and
you had to hope and wait. You had to wait.
Right. Yeah, Luke Cage and all that stuff. I had that when I was a kid, but they were not seeing the success of the other Marvel characters during that time. It was almost like they were sitting in the back of the box. You know what I mean? Then after Brotherman and this whole movement starts, now there's a movement going on with the Black superheroes and the Miles Moraleses and all that stuff. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just I just recognize the wave, and I see how it's going. And to me, I'm more concerned in us owning and controlling what we do and profiting off of what we do. You know, you can't stop what's going to happen. Of course, other people who have the means, they're going to make what they're going to make. I'm like, that's cool. Actually, if anything, it adds to the momentum for the independents, because people are going to see that and say, well, hey, wait a minute. I heard of another one called this. I would like to see that. And, you know, and those things can roll around in that direction.
Do you guys think that you guys being classified as a Black comic, do you think that's a positive, or do you think it maybe people look at it as like, well, it's a Black comic and you don't get the assistance that you maybe could or should?
You know, I don't. Okay. You know what? I think people like categories. It helps them to identify. It helps them when they're trying to discern what they want to see. What do you want to watch tonight? A game show, a sporting event. You know, we categorize things by nature, and so I don't think that if it's categorized, people say it's a Black comic book, that just sets it in a category, and now people can. If that's what I'm looking for, it's just like you go in the book in Barnes and Noble or something like that. They have the Black literature section, but they also have the do-it-yourself section. They also have the teen section. Yeah. And sometimes if you say, well, we're not going to put the Blacks in their own section, we'll blend it in with the teen, then it gets lost. I think that's it's okay with me, because if that's what people are looking for, they'll find it. You know, when Kevin Hart or some guys, they come out with their films, you know, people still look at them, you know, it's a black film because they know what the primary audience they're trying to get. Now, you know, you get super big, you know, like a Will Smith, you can become an everyman.
Yeah.
But you know, for the most part, you know, if you see Morris Chestnut, he's going to be in the next black film. He's in the Best Man 7 or 700, whatever.
Actually, you know what? When we first came out, I remember the first day we came out, and I have a little. Well, they're big now, but at the time they were like little tiny girls. My little niece and cousin, and they were like so small. I think they were like 6 years old at the time, and they were helping us sell the books. So we were saying, because a lot of family was there, you know, right there in New York, all the families in Jersey City, everybody was there helping out. And we said, hey, hold up the books and just say Brotherman Comics, get your Brotherman Comics. And people, you know, at that time, nobody heard of Brotherman Comics. And people were like, you know, they were just responding like, oh, they're so cute. You know, and they were like checking out the books. And then after a while, I said, you know what, just say Black Comic Book. And they started saying Black Comic Book. And people saying, Black Comic Book, where? What, where? And then we said, you know what, just keep saying Black Comic Book. Because Black Comic Book, it pulled that response, like Guy said. It categorized in their minds, wait, there's a black comic book is in existence? But if you say Brotherman Comic, what's that? Because it was the first day it came out. Right. So for us, it was a benefit that I think even lasts till today. I think if it's a negative to anybody, I think it's that person that wouldn't like it either way. So to me, they're not the ones that build the empire. You know, just
in fact, there's a lot of people that would come to the table and they would say, you know what? I collect, and they start naming all their Marvel and DC or whatnot, you know, Harvey Comics, whatever. But a black comic, because it's like something they've been waiting for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Trees?
I always like to get people's input on that because, like, when I go to the grocery store and you go to the ethnic food section, I look around, I'm like, this looks like my grandmother's cupboard. Like, what?
Yeah, so that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it makes sense. And the way that you said it, Guy, it makes sense. Like, I know exactly where to go. I guess I'm trained that way to ethnic foods. Okay, I'm gonna go over here and get my rice and beans. Okay, moving on. Mm-hmm. Makes it easier to.
And you save time.
I think
save time.
Got in and out.
But in the long run, I think it was like a total positive. Like, just think how things were so insular back then, in terms of like if you grew up in a certain area of the country, you got exposed to just certain things. You know, outside of. If you're a kid that like comic books like me in Fort Wayne, Indiana, you got your comic books basically because Marvel and DC and all those can push them out, and you had your local guys and stuff like that. And if you were into arts and stuff like that, you always try to make your comics and stuff like that. You got it based on who was around you in the city you was in. Like Brotherman Comics in the early 90s, 91, 92, you know, to that 12-year-old version of Charlie, that was like huge because, for one thing, you don't think any kind of adult's going to give you anything hip or new as a kid, you know. You're not. But like, and after I got my comic book collection, I felt like an aficionado. People knew I liked to draw. They knew I liked art. They knew I liked a little bit of science, and you know, and like, if you heavily grew up in the church and stuff like that, you had other people that are extension of your family also, deacons, elders. You know, besides your uncles and stuff like that. I don't know how many issue ones I got of Brotherman Comics. You know, like I already knew about it because
that was like not nearly enough. Keep buying.
They were like, you need to read this, and I was like, I know. But by the middle of the year, like Dawud said, like people would come in and they would buy like 10, you know, and then like as the Black Expo thing caught on, you know, there was like my dad was from Alabama, so people down, he had people from Atlanta and other places that would somehow find the comic book from some shop and then send it to me, and then like somebody else out in like where was it? Tennessee or whatever would find it some kind of way. Like I just, it's just amazing at that time how far the books went, you know, because even if you weren't able to get it in that part of like in Fort Wayne or whatever, like somebody had an auntie or had a cousin or had a girlfriend or somebody that lived in New York City and had 2 or 3 copies, or some pastor somehow found it because he went to a convention. Like this literally is how this book got to people's hands, because maybe they didn't sell it everywhere, but somehow people felt that kids that were creative needed to see this because they were reading all these other comic books, you know, and this one was drawn well, the coloring was good, you know, and it held up. You know, that's what I wanted to say. It held up at the time.
Actually, what you said there is one of the things that, you know, I've had so many stories of people who shared, I mean, things that to me, like, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say unreal, because I have to say, I knew this would happen. When some people say, oh, did you think this would happen? And I say, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. And they think you're kind of making it up. And when it's like, nah, because when I was airbrushing in the 80s, it was the same thing. When I first set up that airbrush stand in the mall and people came down there and they saw characters that looked like them wearing the hoop earrings and the sheepskin hats pulled down on it. Nobody was doing that back then. You know, Timberland boots. You know, and they're getting these cool characters on shirts, and I had mobs of people standing around me, and Brotherman was just kind of taking that and packaging it with a story and creating a universe, a mythology out of it. So I knew the effect it was going to have because I already dealt with so many different types of people for almost a decade before the book came out. So when people came up to me and said, man, somebody stole my books. I don't know how many people told me people stole their Brotherman comics. One brother told me that his house flooded in Katrina. Oh, no. And he said when he went back to his house, the first thing he looked for was his Brotherman comics. And he said they were still in plastic and dry. And he said, whoo. And I was like, man. I mean, that was really an honor, because that's the value that he felt he put on his books. Because our catchphrase when the book came out was Brotherman Comics, Big City Comics, not just a comic book. Mm-hmm. And we meant that. We didn't just say it's not just a comic book just because it sounds cool. We knew what it was saying to a community. Right. And for some people who didn't comprehend that, they may just think, oh, you're just saying that. But it's like, no, this is going to change things. That's why on the back of the book it said nothing's going to be the same. And on the back of issue number 2, it said it's still here, Big City Comics, the change is in effect. Because that change to us was, we're going to change this industry. We're going to change how the industry sees us and sees our abilities and the stories that we have to tell. Because we saw like this empire coming in terms of Black entertainment that is like, you know, and when I say Black entertainment, just in the same way that you would say films from India, martial arts films from Asia. You know, it's not a defamation of anybody else. It is a celebration of who you are. And we said, you know, for African Americans, number one, there is no Africa America. It's not a place. You see what I'm saying? So we're already dealing with that concept of trying to establish who are we. And then when it comes to like fantastic films and blockbuster films and great writing, where do we stand in that when we do have all these great writers? But it's like, what's the next level? The next level is of this mythology, something that's on the level of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, but it's coming at you on the regular. So that was the thought process, that Brotherman is the vanguard to this next level of how we're going to see ourselves in media, in entertainment, where people are going to now, when they start thinking of Black people, they're not going to think, oh, that's subpar, or that's, you know, like you're saying, like it's the Black comic book. Well, then maybe the negative thought of Black comic book becomes, oh, get the Black comic book. That's the one. That's the one that you want. Because think about oh man, I'm trying to think. There are so many Japanese when things used to say made in Japan.
Yeah.
They used to be considered cheap.
Yeah.
And then they redefined themselves, and now they represent top quality, and everybody wants to be down with manga. Everybody wants to be down with Japan. You can redesign how people see you once everybody gets on board and says we are going to redefine ourselves. But see, they came together like a board, and they showed people, they showed the world they're going to change that. So that's what Big City Comics was. We said we're going to change the way people see entertainment, but we were just starting off with just me and my brothers at the time.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying? So,
of course, yeah.
I wanted to ask Guy, well, all of us here, do you draw, Guy?
No, not at all.
No? So all of us here have our own little warm-up exercises and stuff when we're getting down and we're about to get dirty. Draw those circles and we draw lines and stuff like that. How does a writer warm up?
I don't know if I have. You know what my warm-up is?
Coffee.
Dinner out the way, get the dishes done, and now I'm running downstairs because I know I only have from 9 to 11 o'clock to do my thing, and then it's bedtime. But no, I do a lot of processing, you know, all the time. I'm just processing it. Technology has now allowed me to do some of the things differently than I did when I was younger. I used to work in a pharmacy, and so when I got the cigarettes and we put them up on the rack, I would take them out the carton. What I would do is unfold the carton box, and then on the inside was it's all white, and so I would keep those papers and I would write on those. When I went to church, I would write on the church bulletins, and I used to carry around that little the little spiral notebook. You probably get it for 39 cents or something like that. I carry those around. Now today, you know, I got the inkpad notepad that's on my phone. It's everywhere. I just jot the notes in there. I still write on random pieces of paper. It all depends, but you know, a lot of it processing is external to when I finally sit down. I say, I'm just going to work on this tonight. You know, I'm going to work on that. I stop here. Oh, I got a new idea. I'll just write the one sentence that I need. I might text it to myself. So I don't have anything. You know, I set up my music, you know, get my drinky drink, and I'm ready to go.
Ready to go.
How many times have you written down an idea, come back and be like, what the hell was I thinking?
Plenty of time. I got a crate right here full of old notebooks. You guys
got a drawer with the big question mark on it.
Like, where was I going with this? But I don't toss them. I said maybe I'll be inspired to with it later. Same thing with the Brotherman. Hey, what's going to be the next story? Yeah, I just have story ideas like this. Nah, it's corny, but you know, it might just need to sit and ferment.
So let's talk about that situation where you're maybe pitching an idea to Dawud, and Dawud, you look at him and you'll be like, son, no.
you know that's okay, because you know every idea I come up with is not the winner.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's good to sometimes, if I say it or I'll send it and he questions it, now I'm getting the feedback like, oh, now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, that's not going to work. Here's an example. There was a sequence that came in issues 3 or 4, and the Derek and Eric, the Twin Terrors. I had written down in the script that there was a sequence of panels. You see a church plate being passed and people putting money in it, and then when you get to the last panel, it's being dumped into a bag as if they were robbing the church. And so Dawud and I have never worked on the book from the same location. So I think I was in California and he might have been in Texas or something like that. And then he said, "Guy, I don't think we should put that in there." And I'm like, "Why, man? That's brilliant. We're gonna get an Emmy off of this."
Yeah.
It's one page. But he said, "You know what? There was a church had gotten robbed or something like that. I remember you telling me that, Dawud, something like that. A church had gotten robbed, and it was just that recent." And so, okay, I said, okay, I'll think about that. So I switched it up because I still wanted them to do something, and I still wanted to use kind of like the same prose. And so we had them hijack an ice cream truck. You know? So that was, and then I said the last panel is just a little girl, you know, with tears because they all want to. The kids are running after the ice cream truck and they're driving off laughing, you know. But you know, it you know, you gets to say something, and that, you know, you get to think about it, and you know, it's a give and take, and you know, I gotta respect his perspective of how he sees it, and I'm always knowing that he's respecting, you know, things I'm putting out there, you know. And it's not that we're putting out, it's just sometimes it's about sensitivity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So there's plenty of times where there's an artist that is trying to get a job at a company, and the company sends them an art test. Dawud, how do you handle that situation?
Oh, you mean like say if I'm going to do some freelance work, you mean?
Sure. Or even actually, where are you working right now?
Oh, I'm just independent. I'm
Oh, okay.
fully independent now. But I've done that. I've when I moved to LA, actually even before LA, I was in New York. I worked at Wanderlust Interactive. Was my first studio job in 1996, and that was a game animation company. And that was my first time, you know, doing character turnarounds, doing storyboards for a production, working with professional animators. So that was like exciting for me. And then after that, I worked on the show Daria at MTV Animation. And then I left New York and went to LA. So at this point, this is really when Brotherman was really after it was like a 5-6 year run with Brotherman. Mm-hmm. And my parents, when they passed away, a lot of things shifted and changed. And then I went from Big City Comics to working at production studios. And now I'm actually learning that process of what you're talking about. So when I got to LA, that's when I really started learning that process, because, you know, LA is like that. Mm-hmm. You know, I was doing a lot of animation tests. At one point, I felt like I had a job but wasn't getting paid because I was going from studio to studio. I went to Sony Animation, and I was doing tests for Godzilla show, Men in Black. I was doing tests for Simpsons. What's that? Family Guy. Mm-hmm. Rugrats. And then finally I got hired on Wild Thornberries, and I was on Thornberries for 2 years and alternated between that and Rugrats. So that was like 98, 99. And then I moved back. And then I moved to Atlanta, and then it continued, you know, being at Turner Studios. And I ended up being at Turner Studios and Cartoon Network for like 12 years. So at that point, I'm used to that. I'm used to like flipping styles. You know, if they want the style to look like this, I'm not trying to draw like the way I draw. I draw, I follow the model pack. And, you know, so that's not a big deal to me. I feel like I learned that process. And those things also help because it forced me, you know, when you're learning somebody else's style, it's like I start to think differently. And then when I go back to work on my thing, I remember some of that stuff and I adapt it to what I'm doing, even though I know my style. I never lose it. But I say, oh, you know, I like how we worked with the textures on this thing. I'm gonna throw some of that in here. And you know, I think it's just something good. It teaches you to grow. And when you're doing something, doing those tests.
what do you say to some of those artists, some of the younger artists, some of us old artists too, when they're all stressed out about, oh, I want to find my style and all that stuff? What do you?
You know, I said I met Mort Drucker from Mad Magazine when Brotherman #1 first came out. He was speaking at School of Visual Arts in New York, and he was doing a presentation. Him and Sam Viviano, and I remember him saying while he was up there, he said everybody comes up and asks him how did he develop his style, and he said the secret. They said, what's the secret to your style? That's right. He said the secret is there's no secret. As long as you're looking for a secret, you'll never find it. You know what I mean? He said basically your style is who you are.
Right.
And I remember that from high school, because when I was in high school, I remember my high school art teacher. I love my high school art teacher. I learned a lot from him, and he taught me a lot. But he used to say I was a dirty artist. Like he said, he said because I was always smudging. I wouldn't use the thing under my palm. So when I'm doing my working with charcoal or figure drawings, I'm always smudging the paper. And he said, your work is grungy. It's dirty. He said, now if that's your style, that's fine. Don't do it out of ignorance. And I said, Mr. Harmon, that's my style. That's why people say they read Brotherman. I said Brotherman seemed grungy. It seemed dirty. And I said, yo, that goes back to high school. Mr. Harmon told me. He said, so that's why I like grunge. I like grunge. I like those styles. I like grunge fonts. And but I think at that young age, I really was dirty. But then because he told me that,
you got to own it.
I started saying, because growing up in Philly and you riding the subway and all that stuff, that had a big influence on my art. So I didn't think of making things pristine and straight lined and all that. I liked crowding things. I liked making stuff like, throwing in extra textures. The wall is too clean. It needs to have some patches in it. Look worn. That's New York City and Philly.
How about you, Guy? Are you like a grungy writer? Do you like have run-on sentences and dangling participles?
Wait, what?
No periods.
You know what? I think I've never had a style defined, and maybe I'm fine with that. But yes, I do take a lot of liberty with language, and people say, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Well, you know what? Somebody made up the word what? Somebody made up the word go." I said, why can't I make up what I need that's going to work for what I need to make happen? So yeah, I mess with it all the time, and I think it's evident in the book. Anytime I write, autocorrect is always trying to tell me don't use the ellipses. I'm like, well, you don't control me. Not yet. Not yet. But
you're not my real English teacher.
But I try to mix. I try to when he talks about Dawud talks about mixing medium, and you guys all know that. I always try to mix genres, just even within one thing. Like I said, I'll get poetry in there. I always try to. I think I'm a great songwriter who doesn't know how to write music, but I think I can do lyrics.
Just end every sentence with the word love, you'll be fine.
I just try to mix up those styles so that when people read, you're not just reading it straight down. I try to think back to my old journalism days. What did I like about journalism and put that in there. So yeah, I guess I'm that way too. But someone else is going to have to define it. I can't define it.
Yeah.
It builds off the complexity of the storylines, that you guys put in, to the series. Once it started getting going, the whole play on words and satire and stuff like that that you put into the book is really interesting. It's interesting that you guys are brothers and you guys are writers. Do you feel the way your brother writes it influences how those comics were early on? Like just because you know, no one gets you like family. So like it's just sometimes like it seems like the pair was like a match made in heaven, you know, literally because of how connected you guys are. You know, I don't think it would have been the same, you know, if all you guys weren't writing together or weren't doing it together, you know.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I don't think anybody really asked me like that. Because actually, before me and Guy did Brotherman, you know, we've worked on projects before. In 1985, we did really the first book on Kwanzaa. It was called Kwanzaa. There it is, right there.
Whoa,
Oh, he has it.
nice.
1985.
You guys practice that.
That's
that link right there. He just pulling it out.
Oh, man, I don't even know what my book is. But anyway, yeah. But that was the first time we did like a published book. I mean, we did like, you know, funny
stuff around the house.
Yeah, just fun stuff around the house. And I think when we first started doing Brotherman, it was just kind of like, yeah, I need a writer, and Guy wrote it, and then I drew it. And I think like he was saying, when it gets to like book 3, and then we started establishing what Big City was. That, you know, Big City is not just a name of a city; it is actually a place with a history. Mm-hmm. And then it started becoming it started becoming more. And then when I started translating Guy's writing, then I started really learning more about writing from reading Guy's writing. Right. Because prior to that, I really just did more artwork. Like I was doing artwork on the streets and stuff like that. And I remember my dad always saying, "You gotta read, mister. You gotta read more." And I used to be like, "Well, what should I read, Dad?" You know, because I just wanted to draw. And if I read something, it had to do something dealing with art. But then working on Brotherman, Guy was always having me I'm always going to the dictionary. I'm like, what's this word mean? I was always throwing all these words, these big words. So I was actually expanding my vocabulary while working on the book. And then I started like appreciating writing more. I mean, not just Guy's writing, but just the process of writing. Wow, man, this is not easy, you know? And so now where we are, like, you know, Guy writing the Duke Denham series, I look forward to getting those books. Because now I think Guy's writing has transcended it's just my brother's writing to now I try to figure out, because I think I even asked Guy, I said, man, how do you come up with this stuff now? Back in the day, I don't think I really asked how'd you come up with it, because I knew, yeah, this guy, he writes, he's my brother, and we're doing this stuff because we had a similar background. But now it's like it's almost like Guy's pulling concepts from another dimension. And that's what I feel like I'm reading. And when I'm drawing, I'm trying to pull these images from that dimension. So it's become more than just us collaborating. And I don't get the same thing, you know, if I'm working on a project for somebody else. Not to say, you know, I can translate other people's work, and I've worked on other things that were funny and cool and stuff like that. But I think Brotherman comes from a soul, you know, from the soul, and I think it's a space that I feel like it's otherworldly, you know, it's an ethereal place that's like an ancestral journey to me.
And I've seen different. I've heard you say that in so many words in the past with other interviews I've seen, or just stuff from me just following the series, because that's why I said I don't think it would have been the same thing for that first run if it was anybody differently, because I feel like, because you guys were family, that link of like, okay, cool, I wrote this backstory. Let's take, for instance, you know, we're moving a little bit more forward in time with the resurgence of Brotherman Comics, you know, over the last couple years, right? And when you guys were just coming back into the limelight, you know, I've seen different things where you guys are talking about, you know, animatics and, you know, the concept teaser that you guys had up back in 2015, you know, for the animated film and stuff like that. I just felt like when we had that bit of time where we didn't have Brotherman Comics, right? But it was a common, at least known from among ethnic, you know, blacks and other people in New York and stuff like that. I think we mentioned Danny Williams in the beginning. That was one of our common like bonding things when we became friends like 6 years ago, was like somehow we were talking about art, and we came up with Brotherman and talked about the story, and we started talking about the individual characters and stuff like that, and how the story was so deep that, like, I think it just influenced the way the pages flew on the page. You know, sometimes it wasn't ever really wordy, but it was a lot of like information that you guys had to figure out how to put on those pages. So you guys even had the wraparound pages where it'd be like 2 pages, but it'd be one big image. I think you guys did that so that you can fit more words on the page. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I felt like the way the comic book was laid out was so revolutionary, only because, you know, you guys are trying to say a lot of different things without it being overly, you know, man, this is a lot to read, you know? So it's just interesting. And when the resurgence came back, I think that same feeling came back of like, you know, still the brothers are still doing this, but it needs to be done right because everybody has such an emotional tie to it. And one of the things I want to ask you guys is, how did that resurgence come about, and how has that momentum been building since 2014 or so up until now? Where are we at with that?
Well, the resurgence, it's funny because to me the resurgence is like, I never intended for Brotherman to stop. It's not like I stopped it, said I'm done with it. It stopped because of, you know, of death in the family, and because it was a family business. That made it more difficult than, say, if I was working at Turner Studios and my mom passed away. You know, I'd still go back to Turner and keep working. Their machine is still going. But this, it was already something fragile that that just the family is building, and then you lose one parent, then lose another, and that has a long-term effect, and it affects different people differently. So, and at the time, we were dealing with basically, it was like a David Goliath story. You know, a lot of people don't really know like what happened with us and Toys R Us, and getting shut out of different places and getting kicked out of certain events that didn't want to recognize us. We didn't talk about everything. And, you know, every place didn't welcome us in open arms. We knew this was clearly like, we knew they clearly didn't want us here, but hey, we don't care. But you can say things you don't care, but at the same time, it has an effect on you. It's like, man, this is what we're up against. It's like we're fighting a beast, man, fighting a machine. You know what I mean? So it's not like we intended to stop. It's like Brotherman stopped at his apex. It stopped mid-sales. It's like people still wanted the books. And we're at 750,000. We'd have been at 1 million by the end of that year, 94. So so I always thought like, okay, we'll get number 12 out next year. Then my dad passed away. All right, well, maybe the following year. And then finally, like what I said, when I went to New York and LA, I said, okay, maybe I'll learn some of these techniques while I'm at the studio, and then I'll come back and do Brotherman. You know what I mean? Because I even remember when I was working on Wild Thornberries, the guy who did the backgrounds, and here at this point, I'm not talking about Brotherman anymore. I'm trying to learn animation. I've never had this experience. And the guy who did the background said, hey, you never told me about this. And he held up Brotherman #1. So it was like, here it is 1998 or 99. And I'm thinking I'm in Hollywood. Nobody knows who I am. You know what I mean? I'm just some guy trying to find my way. And I ran into so many artists working at the studios who said, no, I was inspired by your book. And so it started telling me like, man, I need to do something, but I still didn't know how to do it or when to do it. And so I didn't meet Brian Magee until like 2005, I think it was. And when I met him, I remember I was in awe when I saw his work, because he was doing a lot of packaging for like Ben 10 and Harvey Birdman and all that stuff. And I just thought dude was a beast. But you know, I didn't know that he even knew who I was, and he knew who I was. And then one day we just sat down and he said, hey man, you should bring Brotherman back. And we just started having like sitting down at lunchtime and talking about it. And he wanted to know everything about Brotherman. And I was like, so that was the first time I really sat down with somebody and he wanted to pick my brain about everything. I said, hey, I got music for it too. He said, can I hear the music? Because he's a musician. And then I started bringing in all the beats that my cousins did and stuff that I did, conceptual stuff. And he was into it. And that's how me and him got together and made the theme song, the Brotherman theme song, and we uploaded that. And so it was a process. It was a process moving towards the graphic novel, because even with Guy, the graphic novel was based on our original idea for Brotherman number 12, which was a black and white 24-page book. But we said after all these years, we can't just come back with a black and white 24-page book. We got to give them a masterpiece. So Guy said, all right, let's make if it's going to be a graphic novel, let's make a graphic novel. And then Guy wrote a novel. And then he basically gave it to me, and I said, well, there's a lot to draw. But it was cool because I saw it in my head.
Twice.
Yeah, I remember reading it like when we were conceptualizing it for a long time, and it was marinating for a long time. And I said, man, this is so cool. It's like I'm watching the movie, but I knew it was going to take a long time to create. And so when we finally got book 1 done, that was just the first third of it. Because at first we were going to do the whole book. We said, yeah, man, it's just going to take too long, And so we wanted to at least get something out. So that's why we broke it into a third and got the first one out. We did 7 Brotherman art exhibitions where we put the original artwork on display, and that's where we introduced to the public that Brotherman's coming back, and that was pretty effective. I mean, we had a show in Harlem. Virginia Tech hosted a show. 4 different galleries in Atlanta. Including Auburn Avenue Research Library for African American Culture. They're a big supporter of it, and so we've been. Brotherman has just been on a different path. It's like I tell people, if you're expecting Marvel and DC schedule and the way that they work and move, then you won't like us because we don't work like that. Brotherman is a completely organic project that is kind of working on its own calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you do want it to happen a little quicker, please reference the story that you guys were telling before. We don't know what 10 boxes of cash looks like.
That's right.
So go ahead and
yeah, that's true. That is true. And because some people understand, like Brotherman's been a labor of love. That's like even doing the graphic novel, we did our Indiegogo campaign, and that helped us to get the book printed, but it didn't allow me to have the funds to just sit home and draw Brotherman. It didn't allow me to say, hey Brian, I got enough to pay you a salary for a year. Don't take any of that freelance work on this. So I'm not going to tell him not to freelance if I don't have the salary for him. He's doing this because he believes in it. I'm doing it because I believe in it. Guy's doing it because he believes in it. But we can't stop our main thing to do this, to give to people who are just waiting for it, where they don't realize, like, yo, this is happening because it's coming out of my pocket. I'm sacrificing. I'm not buying sneakers. I'm not buying this, that. So then I can get something out to the public that I want to see done. I'm not complaining about it because this is the way I work. I'm gonna do this anyway. But I'm just saying, this is why it's going to be delayed, because we are investing into this. And I see this as something where it may not necessarily be for the people of today. It's like you're building a legacy for the future. Like in the future, all three graphic novels will be done. The history be, for other people discovering in the future, everything's already done. But for people now, you're living the moment where it has to be created. So I can't help you if you want it tomorrow. You know what I mean? But like I said,
it's coming.
Send us 30 boxes of money.
It'll be good.
I'll stop doing the freelancing, and I'll just do that.
Yeah.
But one last thing. I mean, even with the crowdfunding was cool, but that was a lot of work. That was like another job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was doing that myself. So now it's like I got to package all this stuff up. Some people were calling, hey, I didn't get my thing. And I said, man, I thought I got that all out. So it's like I stopped working on the book to mail the stuff out. And I said, I don't think I'm going to do that for the next book. I mean, if I do, it has to be a team of people that do it for us, and I don't have that. So that's just a side note.
I hear you. Oh, speaking of side note, let me give you a tip. When you are going into these different, the Nickelodeons and the South Parks and the Marvels and all these places, you need to do what I would do. This goes for both of you.
Oh, here we go.
Get an iPad and have Arsenio playing on a loop and be like, here's your art test.
And they'll say, who's that man?
Seeing that.
Yeah, they will.
Be the kids in there working in there now. Who's he?
People would be getting that clip for Christmas.
Hey, let me just throw this in. You had asked me about Dawud and me going that way. I'm gonna go it the other way. When I write, especially when I'm writing something that both of us are working on, I can see his work. Now I don't see it in the product, but I can see it in my head. And you know, I'm comfortable enough and I'm familiar enough with the style that when I'm saying, okay, this guy's standing here, blah blah blah, and this that, I can see it in my head. And then when he produces it, I'm still blown away. But I already kind of know, I can see it, and it helps me conceptualize, and then I can just simply just do it. There's a confidence. I think one reason why we do well, I think I'm very spoiled working with him, because I don't have to explain a lot of stuff to him.
Yeah.
If I just say, hey, these guys, the scene is on a corner, and then I'll just say, hey man, it's like Lincoln Drive, Mount Pleasant, bam. And I'll say, or it's in a store. Hey, remember where I used to work? Bam. Or dude looks like, you remember my man Charles? Yeah. Dude looks like Charles. Dude, like, the young lady looks like, you know, girl from up the street. That is the advantage of working like that.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
You know, so and I appreciate what he does. I'm like #1 fan always. So.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, because obviously the process generally, you know, like you guys were talking earlier, you go from writing and then comes the art, and now you're talking a little bit in reverse. I mean, aside from you being able to see the art and you sharing a common history, that like how has it, because now you guys have developed this mythology, and there's kind of this entire you know, I mean, there's an entire library of work to draw from, and sort of a mythos that you've developed. So how has that in itself affected the creation of additional content? Like, because now I think you're to the point where you're probably like, oh, Brotherman would never say something like that, or this character would never do that. Like, how has the feedback loop like now come back, and it's in a way, I don't want to say writing itself, but like what has already been created, how does that affect what is now you're going to create?
Well, I think it helps us with checks and balances on continuity. There's a lot, you know, Dawud, I'll say he is the one that remembers all the little pieces. Yeah, I remember on panel 6, you know, he's like that guy that you always hear on TV. Episode issue 3, page 50, panel 2, nice. And the left, he was holding a pen. You know, was the pen clicked or not? You know, that's him. You know, because I guess, you know, because he's drawing at me. I'm always, after I write one thing, I'm thinking ahead. I'm like, what's coming next? I'm always thinking about what's next. So I don't spend a lot of time of trying to memorize what happened in the past. And so Dawud does a good job checking me on, no, remember? It wasn't that street, it was on that street, or that was that person, and then I'll say, oh yeah, that's right, and then I can make my correction. But I am always trying to think well down the line. We were talking, Dawud mentioned the Duke Denham detective series. In my mind, I've already mapped it out for 10 books, and so I'm always thinking about, if I'm doing this now, how do I get this in book number 3 to show up again in book number 7 and things like that. And you know, I'm not an expert at that, because but that's what I'm always trying to do. I'm always thinking in the future. And to your other question, but to the point, I think it's just a lot of check and balances. You know, you said this, and now you're saying this, and I just got, how do I square it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And Yeah, because I think because over the years, what happened was, when we first made the street map on the back of number 8 in '92, I think it was, and that's when I first was trying to picture the pieces of the city, and that's when Big City was really starting to come together. And then after that, years later, I did the subway map. And the subway map I put together in 2008. And we introduced that at the Brotherman Art Show in 2009. We did a huge 24 by 36 map. We wanted to look like a map that was actually in the subway system, And so when you look at that, because even when I think about when I'm making the map, I'm saying, okay, Antonio Valor lived here. Melody lived over there. The courthouse is down here. Scribble and Scrabble's art supply shop is over here in Vex County. Then I starting to, I see Big City in my mind the way you would see New York City or any other city. So that's why if Guy's writing something and he says, yeah, this happens on this street. And I say, Guy, no, it's not that street. That's at this address over here. And guy be like, oh, okay, whatever, But to me, it's like, I'm catching it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's never really a big deal between us. It's just like, I'll catch it and then I'll tell him. But then he may come up with something that's a new street. And then I ask him, hey, where is that on the map? Because Guy's describing, like in Duke Denham, there's a neighborhood he created where it was, I think it's the first exclusive neighborhood, Passive Grove.
Passive Grove.
Yeah, and that wasn't on the original map. But the way it read in the Duke Denham book, it was like, Guy described it as there was no exit from the expressway. It was like, I guess the general populace can't get there because it's so exclusive. So I figured, okay, so this is where the old money is. This is where the wealth of Big City is. So I had to look on the map and say, where would that be at? And I saw a section. I said, hey, this could work well here because it's not near any of the expressways. And then I put it on the map. And then after that, it becomes like, it's almost like that becomes the reality within this fantasy.
That's awesome.
And then you can build other adventures that take place in there. And now we pull from that source.
And what I do is when I'm working on the Duke Denhams, I have the Big City map in the outer room. And I'm always running back and forth because I say, okay, where's the action just going to take place? I'll say, well, last time we were here, I wanted to take place down here. And having the subway map is perfect because in the second book, I even have it going through what stops he got off to finally get to, the particular crime scene. And so it really helps because then I said, oh, how does he get from here to here? So, you got to take this line, you got to take the silver line, you got to take the express, and then, all of that.
It's a cool way to add more depth. It's because it's physically there already. It's a really interesting way to add to a story or to a world, not even just a story anymore. Just like since there's a map, it's physically a place to me in my head the way we're talking, and you can get real how people ask, well, how do you do this in writing or how do you do this in writing? Well, it seems like with this map and the way you guys have fleshed out this world, it gets real easy to get real technical on the streets and have some kind of layered say if there was a cop talking to another cop about something, you can get real technical about where this is happening and why this is happening. This district is based off of this. This is where that old money is. This used to be Printers Row back in the day. It can get really, really cool. So that's so interesting. That's so cool. That's the way you guys did it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in fact, I already, I see the need of the map having to expand because I was looking for something to put something somewhere yesterday. I'm wrapping up. I finished the 5th Duke Denham book, and I said I need another place. The place needs to expand.
Everybody needs a Puerto Rican neighborhood.
Yeah. Where we gonna put that?
But one of the other things about the world building is like even the currency. Like in the graphic novel, we have the currency in the back of the book. And that was something that was pretty unique because we were showing the founders of Big City. Because, you know, when we first started, Big City was just like Guy was saying, okay, you got a hero, where they live, Big City. And, you know, in the beginning, it was that humor. But then we decided, okay, Big City is named after Lindsay and Big. And then we built the mythology of Lindsay and Big. And all of that is in the graphic novel, where Lindsay and Big and the founders, how they discovered this land mass, and it sprawled into this the metropolitan region of what it is. And that's a whole nother adventure. We were talking about, hey, we can explore that. And that's kind of like one of those frontier type stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the original name of Big City guy came up with Kamarath. And they named it Big City after Lindsay and Big died in his memory because he was the founder. And so all of these things are in the graphic novel. So a lot of the fans, they say, wow, man, this is really feeling more and more like a real place. So, you know, so when you think about multimedia and this one day going to film, which has always been the goal, now it's like this is giving the creators a lot to play with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because even when you think of Gotham City, and you know, we grew up on that, I don't think of neighborhoods. I just think of the
city,
you know, the asylum and just buildings. I don't think of neighborhoods. And to me, I wanted Brotherman to kind of be reflective of how we saw neighborhoods growing up. You know, they were always different. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to like Black projects, Black stories, or things like that, it's always one-dimensional. We always live in one type of community, or it's the opposite. It's Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know, they're in Bel-Air and they don't know how to act.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so fancy. I don't know how to act when something is fancy. You know what I mean? So that's so corny. You know, when there's so, you know, Black people, just like any people, we're not one-dimensional. People are multi-dimensional. You know, so that's what we wanted with the story. We wanted to show that Big City is just that. It's a city. It's not a ghetto. It's not a hood like people try to you know, pigeonhole us into that concept and that ideal. And it's like, no, that's not what it is. This is the bottom and the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I remember one time a young man came up to me and he said, I got my comic book, and you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to show people my world. And I'm trying to create a world. And then he looked at me and he said, oh, I hear you. And then he walked off.
Probably had to be like, I gotta go back and work now. Same way Carlos goes. I gotta go back. I know.
Right. So I wanted to talk about winning an Emmy. That's it. Let's talk about that.
Oh, man, okay. Well, I mean, I guess for me, it was just, I mean, it was, that's when I was at Turner Studios. This is in 2008. And I was doing a lot of storyboards just regularly every day. Now I've won other awards for other projects. And what happened was the Dalai Lama was coming to Atlanta to speak at Emory. And their team came to Turner because they needed a public service announcement made. And they wanted something that reflected, you know, the ideals of the Dalai Lama in a very short, condensed time. I think it was a 30-second spot or a 60-second spot. And so I actually sat down with them and I showed them a piece that I did. I played capoeira Angola, African martial art. And I did an animation for the group that I play with that showed like the history, you know, of the whole capoeira thing in a consolidated 30-second piece. And they liked that. And they said, oh, can you do something like that? So I storyboarded a concept for them. They liked it. And then I did a lot of the illustrations for the for the piece, and then the 3D department took my illustrations and mapped them onto, like, there was a lotus flower, so I had to draw the lotus flower leaves so when they curl, it's my drawings that are actually curling. And there was a 3D image of the Buddha, so I actually painted the Buddha in Photoshop, and then it was mapped onto a 3D model. So it was a drawing of the Buddha rotating in 3D. And so basically it was like my drawings coming to life in 3D. And then at the end, it went to the Dalai Lama's face, which was a drawing that I did that they mapped onto a head. So the head actually rotated. And then it was nominated for an Emmy Award. And at the time, you know, I wasn't really thinking too much of it. And that goes back to when I was in high school. You know, I won a lot of awards in high school, but I never thought much of awards. I always thought like awards, you know, that's like somebody patting you on the shoulder saying, good job, but they never went to my head. I was always like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, you know, and I just move on to the next thing. Not that I don't think anything of them. I just didn't really, you know, so I guess that carried with me into adulthood. So it wasn't really until I'm at the Emmy Awards and our category is up there did I actually get excited. Like, hey, wait a minute, I can actually win an Emmy? You know, and then come to find out we won, and so, you know, everybody on the project, they basically, because when I won it, it sat in a box for I think almost 2 years.
Oh wow!
And it wasn't until another guy said, "Man, you know, this is huge." I didn't really think about how big it was, and so it was other people around me said, "Hey, you know, that's part of your title now." But I didn't really, like I said, I've always kind of been, I guess, kind of like that underground soldier, artist, street artist. You know, that when it comes to things like that, I guess I really wasn't too familiar with how the process works, and I always kind of had to prop myself up over the years. So when people give me accolades or accomplishments, they usually don't go to my head because I always feel like I have so many things to do. I just be like, oh, thanks, cool, appreciate it. And then I might put it in a box and keep moving. But so yeah, that's the story behind that. But it's sitting out here now. It's sitting under a light. It's got its own little special place.
That's awesome. All right, so now it's about time we.
Here they come. Here they come, yo. Here they come. Here they come. This or that. This or that. This or that. This or that. This or that.
Dawud and Guy, there's this little game we play called This or That.
I don't have to take off my shirt, do I?
I know we just.
I don't know what kind of games y'all playing over here.
I know we just met, but I don't know if anybody wants to see that.
Hey, guy, calm down. Calm down. Calm down.
Okay.
This first one is for Dawud. Dawud, colored pencils or airbrush?
Ooh, good one. Color pencil.
Ooh.
Guy,
Yeah.
long form stories or short form stories?
Short.
Nice. Dawud, digital or traditional?
Oh man.
It's a hard one.
Yeah. You just want a straight answer. I can't give any.
You can do what you want. This is your show. We're here to see
You can elaborate all you want.
Okay. For commercial work, digital. If I'm doing stuff for myself, traditional.
All right, cool.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Guy, colon or semicolon?
Ellipses.
You know what? I like the semicolons. It makes me feel smarter.
I do like the semicolon. I like
Nice.
that.
Yeah.
All right, so this is for both of you. Reading comic books or watching comic book movies?
Watching comic book movies.
Watching comic book movies.
Yeah.
Wow.
There we go. Nice.
All right.
Interesting.
Now I'm going to have to ask you guys if you need to elaborate on this one. Go ahead.
Ready.
Philly cheesesteaks or Georgia peaches?
Philly cheesesteak.
Georgia peaches.
Oh,
Wow.
I'm vegan now. I've been
Ding, ding,
vegan
ding,
for 22 years. Now wait a second. Now that there's a vegan chili, there's a vegan Philly cheesesteak place on South Street now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Philly, in South Philly.
Okay.
So
That's good to know.
if I had to choose between that, then yeah, Philly
Listen,
vegan.
vegan food has come a long way. When I was a kid, my mom was trying to cook that stuff, and it all tasted like rubber shoes.
I guess it has come a long way.
It has been, man. It has. Now I have a tendency to I'm not even vegan, but I have a tendency to pick the vegan option when I go out and stuff.
It all depends on who makes it. Like anything else, everybody can't make good chicken and steak.
That's for sure. Yeah.
You know.
I thought you were going to say for your this and that cheesesteak versus hoagie. That's not.
There you go.
See,
There's another one.
Nice, had to go in.
there you go.
Do you have an opinion? You kind of you toss that hoagie out there like you had something to say.
Now he don't make you lie in it.
I say
Hoagie.
yeah, hoagie.
Yeah, I'm in. I was about to say something, but Philadelphia folks come at you incorrectly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that one there.
Mom's the word.
So let's go ahead and get into. Hang on, our sound guy was.
Say what?
We're gonna do.
Oh, you went.
Oh, everyone's credit score just went up.
He just sits there.
All right, I'm gonna start like this. Artist inspiration.
Oh, Brotherman Comics.
Brotherman Comics. You know why? Because I do what I want. No, for real. If you guys go to Instagram.com/Brotherman Comics, COMIX, and go get in on this goodness.
Oh, look at
These
that.
guys.
Look at the throwback picture.
What I wanted to do is, what I want to do is come down here and talk to you guys about this. What was that like?
Oh yeah. You know, DMC has the his line of comics out. Daryl makes comics.
Yeah.
And so I ran into him in North Carolina, the North Carolina Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
And we were actually on a panel together with Fool Richardson, and it was a great time. He's really down to earth brother, and for me, you know, he's been one of my heroes since since I was in just graduating high school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of funny when we met. We found out we were the same age, a lot of the same interests that we had a lot of the same interests because we came up during the same era. So, you know, we kind of kicked it off right away. So that was a cool opportunity to meet that brother.
Nice. So I just wanted to do that because I wanted you guys to blush. But my artist inspiration is a guy named Scott Gustafson. This kid goes absolutely bananas. Go to Scott Gustafson, 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 whatever. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Are these traditional? Oh yeah, oil on canvas. Okay.
Yeah. That's a 24 by 30 inch print that is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
His attention to detail is crazy. It's like an old school, if you're listening on iTunes, it's like an old school storybook style.
Yeah. When I look at it, I think I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what else. We've got some fantasy in here. So he's just, I mean,
Details.
this guy gets in there. Yeah.
Yeah, details are crazy. Lighting, composition, ridiculous.
All right. That's it. So go ahead and check him out. Scott Gustaf. I don't know why I'm struggling. Gustafson. GUSTAFSON.com. Scott Gustafson. We can sit here and go bananas, but Charles, you feel like going?
Sure. Let's do this. All right. My my artist is one of my personal favorites. And at this year's C2E2, which is Chicago Comic Con, I got to meet him again. I got to meet him, actually not again. I've seen him before, never got to talk to him, but this time I talked to him in length. This guy's name is Peter. I don't want to butcher his last name, but Mobatcher, whatever I think his last name is. But this is his website, which is angelarium.net. He's a concept artist and just a accomplished artist in general. Just amazing work here that he does. And I talked to him. So stay tuned. He's excited to come onto the show. So
Dun,
just,
dun, dun.
Oh, you dropped that
Yeah,
like all
like
quiet.
that. Like
Don't
that.
don't you threaten me with a good time.
So it's he's actually, it's funny where you see people's art. He had a book before that he put out that was like sold out, last couple of years, and now it's like sold out. You can't get it. And I think he's in the process of doing a new one, but like we said before on the shows, we got to deal with life and everything else. But he lives in Illinois, which I didn't know, like 20 minutes from me. So this is crazy. I thought he was out somewhere else, but he has a YouTube presence. Go to his website. He's also on Instagram, so you can look him up. His name is I'll spell it out for you. It's Peter, and then his last name is MOHRBACHER. Really cool stuff. And I've been looking at some of his like
Peter
Moorbacher. Thank you. He's putting a lot of video stuff up, and like let's get some more of his stuff up here for you guys, because it's concept stuff, and it's like just amazing work, stuff that I want to make in 3D and model and stuff like that. And I was like, your stuff just breathes well. So he's done concept work for games, stuff like that. He'll talk more about it on the show. But like, this is one of my favorite ones, And I wanted to get all he had at this year's con was like just prints and stuff like this. But I was like, dude, I want that book. He's like, the book's sold out, But this is a book like, when I go to cons and stuff, like I'm a big fan of like art books. I collect them. Even back in college, I was buying art books, dropping, $600-700 more than I had as an art student on books. And comment for the rest of for like 2 months. Parents wondering where all my money went. But like, because these books are cool, because I always feel like there's one artist, one or two or whatever, that's gonna catch me at a show. I've done this for the last 10 years, and like I would have bought his art book that day if he had another one, because his work is that amazing to me. So check him out. He's really cool. We're in the works of trying to get him on the show, get his schedule locked down. But he was so cool to talk to, and so down to earth to talk to. But at the same time, he's really big into like talking about VR and some of the things we've talked about on the show. More so, it's kind of freaked me out because we started talking, and you get that like, comic book fans are a little different, when you go to these places. So after you break down the initial conversation with an artist and they really start talking to you, sometimes the fans start looking at you like, yo, dude, if you don't walk away so I can so I start feeling the nerd rage from behind me, because we're having a legit cool conversation. Because he's like, you don't know how long I've been standing in line to get this dude to sign this. And it was always supposed to be a quick, yo, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. We talk about something, but you always get triggered by one word. I think it was VR or something else we were talking about. He's like, yo, I got all these ideas for this. I was like, you need to come on the show and talk about it. Yeah. So, yeah, this dude's stuff is amazing. I thought it was like the best of both worlds of what we like when we look at these artist inspirations and stuff like that.
Awesome.
So, yeah, check him out.
Very nice.
Get it in your life.
Good job, Charlie.
Yeah,
All right. Since we're on the topic of comics, I picked a webcomic artist. She's Swedish/Finnish. Mina Sundberg. The comic's called Stand Still, Stay Silent. It's kind of in the vein of this kind of new popular web style that's a little bit vaguely Sunday cartoon, but also with some anime and the
Oh, really?
comic book style. That's kind of like there's a trend I think I see appearing. But the thing that caught me about this was the way it evolved. The color. I don't want to say the style, but it's really more about the color and the lighting, because the original couple panels, and there's like 700 plus. I don't know. You can click on here.
Serious?
Yeah, she's got like 700 plus of these. But if you start at the beginning, it's this really kind of etchy, medieval, old school book, like from the 50s or 60s, the way they would have done on like a metal letter block press. And then let me just skip ahead all the way to the most current one, and look at how it's evolved in this color. I mean, she's still really using color and lighting, but in like a totally different way. So yeah, I'm on 725 here. So if we go somewhere like 500, she really started playing around with color and lighting, and is
this digital? Or some of those others, or is this a mix?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. There isn't a whole lot.
Watercolor background stuff on top.
I think it's probably one of those things where she's got scanned textures, and she's digitally putting them in. But that's a good question.
I've noticed there's no words, so I see a career opportunity for someone like Guy.
There it is.
Oh, we do have words.
Yeah, there are.
Out of a job again.
That's interesting, Jack. And I applaud her for having so much content on.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that actually this more recent style developed really quite early. Even way back when 150. Go back to 75.
Oh yeah, look at this. A lot.
It's starting to get a little simpler, blockier. But oops, there goes the mouse again.
I feel like the line work went thinner as it's getting newer.
I think so. This older stuff is a little more gestural and thicker, and you got these big blocks of color, which it's certainly bolder. There's a lot more blacks in there.
Yeah, look at that. Those are basically silhouettes almost. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you get back much more rigid. Clearly not. It could have been stylistic. It could have been something of a comfort level. But and then it's funny. You jump to like 475, and here we are with these kind of interesting lighting patterns and stuff.
That's something I'd like to talk to Dawud about, because I know when I draw, and then I did a couple like comic book style of drawings, and then when I first started doing those, my strokes would go from thin to like super thick, and I was like, yeah. But then the more I did it, the more I realized I didn't need that thick line, and the line actually gets in the way. Is that something that you went through?
You mean the line variation, like evolving it?
Yeah.
I always did. Especially like when I first started. Like I said, I had no comic book experience. I didn't even know how to use the pen and ink. I think by the time I got to the third book, I was using like the Rotring calligraphy pens and the rapidographs, and so the original series was done mostly with those and Zipatone. I don't think I really started getting a handle on inking until I started working at production studios, like years later. Especially when I came to Turner, came to Atlanta, because when I got here, it was 2000, and that's when most of the spots were, hand inked. And with precision, doing stuff like Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab and all that stuff. So that's when I really started learning more about precision. So when I went back to doing my own stuff, I think I started having more control with the line quality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, so check it out. It's Stand Still, Stay Silent. SSSScomic.com. 4 S's.
We'll have a link in the show notes as always.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good job, guys.
So that's it. I hate that we just put down 2 hours because I want to continue to talk. Can I maybe talk you guys into, well, number one, we have to have you guys back. It's mandatory. We got to get Brian in here. So that's a warning, Brian. We will be coming at you. But have you guys ever thought of doing like a Twitch or a YouTube live or anything as you guys are creating stuff to maybe re-energize your fan base?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I've had ideas to do. I just been like just maxed out in time.
Yeah.
You know, it's, like I feel like I need more of a team to get certain things done. And I feel like sometimes I'm behind on certain things because I'm not doing all the things that I want to do. But then I feel like, well, I can't really focus on that. I think I better get the main thing done, which is get this book out. Because the book in itself becomes like an everyday thing. Like that locks me down every day. And then I got freelance on top of that.
Right.
You know, I did some like film projects and stuff recently. So so basically the answer, yes, I want to do that. It's just a matter of finding the time to get it done.
Right?
Yeah, I see a lot of stuff that people are doing. I'm like, man, I want to do that. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I get it. Do we have any more questions for the guys?
We got a lot, but we could go on for days.
Yeah.
I know this could be a weekly series.
Yeah. I have to eat and wash. That's mandatory. I can't go too long.
Well, I better make sure I show a cover of the book.
Boom!
Yeah.
That.
See?
Hey, look at that.
I thought I had mine up.
And since we talked about Duke Denim,
Pull it out. There it is.
Yeah.
the first one, Hold Them Close.
Mhm.
There's the second one, Silver Roses for the People. Third one, High Notes, Low Blows. And the fourth one, The Troublesome Troop. And coming soon, it's already written, you know, we're just working on the artwork and stuff, Field of Headstones.
So is there anywhere that someone can go and buy these?
Hit them, Dawud.
Brothermancomics.com. That's Brotherman, COMICS.com. Duke Denim is exclusive, also available at BCE Pressworks.
Yes.
Along with some of Guy's other writings. And Brotherman Revelation, the graphic novel, is available on Amazon.com. You can Google it, BarnesandNoble.com.
Get it.
Yeah, that's pretty much, those are the main. Oh, and the digital download is on Comixology.com.
Oh,
Get
nice.
the book.
Nice.
Go
Get
get
it.
the book.
Get the book.
Yeah.
Y'all need that tangible. Hold it, feel it, smell it.
That's right. On your shelf. Pull it out again. Read it.
Feel it.
Yeah.
And again, you're at Instagram.com/Brotherman Comics, COMIX.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just letting people know. I just did a storyboards for Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul. Yeah, so I got to watch it over the weekend. That's my first time seeing my name in the movie credits.
Nice.
How cool was that?
Yeah, that was a. I hope to have many more. I actually have another project I did for 20th Century Fox. I don't know when that one's coming out. So I'm trying to get more board work, and my goal is one day be an executive producer. So I'm getting top billing.
Nice.
Just working my way up.
Nice. I always remembered. So Jack worked in the special effects industry, and I remember going to the movies with him on the first project he ever worked on, and we were there. His name went up And he was like, "Yay!" And I was always on the website end of things. So I'd be working on projects, but you'd never see my name anywhere. I think we've been friends long enough. I can say this on this show. So I worked on Tom Cruise's website, and I was like, I don't get my name nowhere on here. Like, this is dumb. And so I put some special code on there.
Yes, I remember
my
this.
name, my picture was showing up.
It was amazing. Well, that website's different now, so he got somebody else. But
Redid it. It was
I used to like show that to friends because they think it's cool. You go to Tom Cruise's like, and I would just be like, "Watch this!" I'd like to know the secret code, and then Carlos would pop up on the screen.
And what's funny is people would be like, "How'd you do that? Put my picture on there." I'm like, "No, that's not how it works." Like, like
it's a revolving door.
yeah. They're like, "What site you go to make that happen?" I was like, TomCruise.com. Get out of here, dude. They thought it was some trick. I was like, no, I had to put my name somewhere.
Right.
Anyway, that's that. So, hey, Charlie, if people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
If you're looking for me online, you can find me. My personal website is cargocollective.com. So that's Charlie B. Williams. That's where all my artwork and stuff is. You can find me on Twitter, CBW3. Instagram is CharlieBW3. Almighty Pinterest, see Charlie BW3. Check it out on that Facebook page. Is you guessed it, Charlie BW3. So check it out. Getting in life.
Nice, thank you, sir. How about you, Jack?
As always, I am at sketchbookjack.com and sketchbookjack everywhere else: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest. And we actually haven't talked about this since it happened. You can also find me on Netflix at the tail end of a kids show called Spirit.
Yeah.
Yay.
It's a good show. Daughter loves it.
All right, so I have to say this. Landon Wilson, I don't agree with you. Charlie does not win the inspiration again.
Of course I do.
His was cool, but you need to go see Scott Gustafson and then get back to us.
Better yet, go see Brotherman Comics. Even better.
Yeah, or
Pick up that book.
Go get that book. Yeah.
Go get it.
That's it. And I am Carlos Gomez. You can basically Coconut Justice absolutely everywhere. Just go check that out. And if you're watching this show on YouTube, click the subscribe button because it's cool. All the cool kids are doing it. Just saying. So that's it. Thank you both so much for.
Thank you so much, guys.
Hey, one more thing.
Yeah.
One more thing. You talked about at the top. Now we talked at the top of our program here about him airbrushing shirts.
Oh, you
just pull one out.
Hey!
Yeah.
Boom, son! Look at that.
Remember that one, Dawud?
Wait, oh man, that was like 1985.
89.
89. Man.
That was your brother keeps everything. That's awesome.
That's what I'm saying. I don't even have
it. It's white still.
Hang on. I want to test them. I want to see a grilled cheese sandwich. Bring in the hoagie.
have these people in the background. Yo, go in the archives. Pull that out.
Man.
Awesome.
Hey, well, thanks for having us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
It was an honor.
Yeah.
We'll pass the word on to Brian so we can come on back and give him his shine.
Yeah,
awesome.
Please.
Thank you. And that's it for us. Everyone have a good week.
See you guys.
See ya.
All right. Take care.